Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately titled IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association, and as part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, which are just conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. Yesterday was the International Day of Play. So you don't know what day that is, but it was June 11th, 2025. And so today we're using the International Day of Play sticker as our background instead of being on a porch, because we want to remind everyone that on June 11th of every year, no matter what day it falls on, that is the International Day of Play, where we ask you to allow children to lead the play all day. And so all over the world yesterday, people were celebrating the International Day of Play, many places in the United States. So we just want you to mark your calendars for that for 2026 and start planning how you'll celebrate the International Day of Play. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch is Preston Blackburn. Hi, Preston.
Hi, Deb.
Preston is the owner of Pivot to Play and Pop and Rock. She created Pop and Rock in 2000 when her daughters were preschoolers. I love this story. What started as a simple exercise program has evolved into one that focuses on creating opportunities for kids to hone the fundamental strengths, skills, and motor patterns they need to be successful and have a happy school journey. Pop, and Rock coaches lead proprietary curriculum in school settings in the Richmond, Virginia area, where new games and activities are tested and then shared widely. In 2019, she created Pivot to Play to help teachers get kids moving during the school day to fill the play gap. Using brain science and logic, as well as a treasure chest of games that help kids understand how to use their bodies for schoolwork while laying the neural wiring for improved focus and behavior. Preston leverages fun to help classrooms move from chaos to calm, and has been honored to share her knowledge and education with play advocates coast to coast. And this is the part I love. Preston's two daughters now use their career experience to advise and consult Pivot to Play growth and development. So that is just the most beautiful story, that it has this
Yeah.
legacy that is just moving forward. And I just love it. And I think the hardest thing for us to get across to superintendents and principals is if you take away recess, you're taking away children's ability to focus.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why this has been so hard for us to get across. But today, Preston's going to talk to us about the power of purposeful play, structured versus unstructured play during the school day. So I'm very excited for us to like tease this, pull it apart, and start thinking about it.
Thanks, Deb. I'm so glad to be here because I've been such a fan of the Porch Play Chats for such a long time. And you and I keep crossing our paths at conferences,
No,
but we never get a chance to deep dive into anything when we're at a conference. So this is kind of fun, and I appreciate your having me.
well, we're so happy to finally get this.
So so when we think about structured play versus unstructured play, you and I know unstructured play is really, when it's in the school day, it's really that recess. It's that child-driven, self-directed free play that builds all kind of social emotional skills. And it really is kind of the favorite child of play during the school day compared to structured play. And structured play, when I talk about structured play, I talk about big physical play, play that involves the whole entire body. And when we talk about structured play in the school day, we're really talking about PE,
Mm-hmm.
which frequently, more often than not, is either misunderstood or misused and has more of a sport focus, or is
Mm-hmm.
considered to have more of a sport focus. And at Pivot to Play and Pop Up and Rock, we do not focus on sport. We focus on moving the body the way the body is intended to move, because science shows us that the brain needs to understand how to use the body in order to function in the classroom. So I'm trying to bring sexy back to structured play because there's a place for it in the school day, in the classroom, and out of the classroom. So we need to kind of rejigger our PE programs, but really take advantage of moving the body in a physical way in the classroom as well. And it's the beauty, just like unstructured play or recess, is it's it's readily available, it's inexpensive, children crave it, it's easy to implement, and it's apolitical. So we should be using more of it, but we're not. And there's a huge play gap because kids aren't moving their bodies after school like we did. So what's happened is kids are weaker than they've ever been. Studies show us that over and over again, and they're weak because they're not moving their bodies. And what's happened is we've found that kids lack practice in moving their bodies. So because they don't have the practice in doing it, they don't have confidence in moving their bodies. They don't know how to move their bodies. It's no fun to move their bodies. So what happens is that creates this downward spiral into more sedentary behaviors. But again, the brain needs the body and needs to understand the body in order to perform in the classroom. So like if you take the 3 R's that we all need to make school happen, and they're foundational for reading Chaucer, algebra, being able to do chemistry, we need to be able to master the 3 R's. But there's stuff that has to happen before that's physical, that's motor based, that's skill based, that comes from the trial and error of big body play. So, if you're going to read, your eyes have to team, they have to focus, they have to track. Well, that comes from catching and throwing a ball, moving across the monkey bars, or even crawling. And if we want to write, we have to be able to hold a pencil, move it across a page without breaking the tip, estimate how much space we've got on the page for the letter or the word. And all that comes from moving the body in the trial and error of big body play, like hide and seek, digging in the dirt, or climbing the ladder to the slide. And then for math, the 3rd R, we have to recognize patterns and sequences. We have to have them internalized. And the way we internalize them is through moving the body, skipping, galloping, pumping our legs on a swing, or even hitting a piñata with a stick. And all that, those big physical movements help build that foundation for the 3 R's. And without the 3 R's, we can't do the other stuff. But again, studies are showing that kids are weaker than they've ever been. So we need to get them moving again in the classroom. And if you think back on like what we all did when we were kids, we came home from school at the end of the day, we got a snack, we were sent outside, and we couldn't come in until the street lights came on. So we became masters of yelling car, on the street, because you had to know when the car was coming. We cleared the street, the car went by, but we were on the street playing because we needed big space for kickball, dodgeball, or Red Rover. And if we weren't on the street playing, we were building forts, we were riding our bikes, we were playing hopscotch, we were playing kick the can, but it was all very physical. And kids aren't physical anymore. And, we all talk about how 90% of brain growth happens in the first 5 years of life. And brain growth happens when we make a new connection between neural cells, and it lays this neural wiring in our brains. But those new connections come with new experiences, which is why there's so much brain growth in the first 5 years, because everything is new. But if we think about what's happening with young children, those experiences that they're having are predominantly physical. And majority of those physical experiences are motor based. So in other words, if we don't get kids moving, their brains are not growing. They have to move in order to learn. And now we have kids who are weak all the way up into middle school, up into high school. And so it's making school harder than it should be. And so that's what we really do, is we actually have found 18 strengths and skills that are consistently weaker than they should be, weaker than they have been. And so our curriculum and our programming all focuses on those 18 strengths and skills, because we know from studies that kids need those strengths and skills in order to be successful in the classroom. So that's our goal, because we know that we can implement more moving in the classroom, and it doesn't take up a lot of space. It's inexpensive. I mean, it could be as simple as you're a 3rd grader, you've been working on a test or a worksheet, and you need to turn it into the teacher. Well, you have to hop up to the teacher's desk with your worksheet on one foot, and you hop back on the other foot, or you could bear crawl up there, but it doesn't take up a lot of space. And you're still building all these strengths and skills and motor patterns that are needed for school. So my goal is, if I'm successful making this change, then my job goes away, and that's fine with me.
You're almost ready to retire,
Exactly.
yeah, it'll take years still. So you have plenty of time, right? So,
Exactly.
one things that I find that is really fascinating is that, sometimes because teachers say, well, I know kids need to move in the classroom after they've been sitting for a while. So we're just going to put on a YouTube video and do a brain break, which is driving me
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. We need to get away from the screens.
Yeah,
Screens
so much.
the screens are the devil,
They
really.
really are. And people go, you're just overreacting. I'm like, no, I'm not, because what sometimes then teachers will do is, oh, we can skip recess because we did 3 brain breaks this morning. Or the kids didn't finish the work, so they have to stay in and finish their work instead of going to recess. When we're just like and my whole sentence is, how good intentions are harming development, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I do this and I've checked off that box,
Yeah.
not understanding the depth of what that doesn't do.
Right.
And
Well,
so it's a struggle when superintendents are saying, well, I have to get these test scores up. And I said, then you need to let kids move outside freely,
yeah.
and you need to do some active learning in the classroom, not screens or worksheets.
Yeah.
So
They need to be physical and
they
build the
need to
strengths
be
that they don't
physical.
have. It's we have a sensory skills category of strengths and skills that we know are weaker than they should be. And it includes auditory awareness, visual awareness, proprioceptive system, and vestibular system. And
Mhm,
we know that, the proprioceptive system is it's our sense of force. It lives in our ligaments and joints. It allows us to build a mental map of our bodies by using the weight of our limbs to understand what our arms and legs are doing.
mhm,
So like, if you asked a preschooler, where are your toes? They have to reach down and touch them because they're still building that mental map. But if I asked you, you're like, well, Preston, they're sitting on the end of my foot.
mhm,
But they're still building that mental map. But that mental map helps them move with skill, whether it's to climb a tree, kick a ball, or even write their name. And that sense of force allows them to understand the differences in force between what it takes to hold an egg or pet a kitten versus what it takes to crack open a piñata. And they transfer that to the classroom when they understand the difference between what it takes to squish Play-Doh into a shape versus what it takes to put pencil to paper without breaking the tip. And
mhm,
they gain this understanding by jumping, pulling, pushing, and climbing. And that doesn't happen when you're on a screen.
mhm,
That only happens when you're very, very physical. And what's happening is when I go and train teachers about all of this, I start talking about the proprioceptive system because children who are lacking proprioceptive development, which has been on an enormous rise, are going to body slam their friends. They're aggressively wrestling and tagging their friends. They're just being very physical. They'll sit down at circle time and they'll start doing donkey kicks, but it's because their brains haven't received appropriate proprioceptive information from pushing, pulling, jumping, and climbing. So they're going to seek it out anyway. But when we give them an opportunity to put pressure on their joints, then when it's time for them to sit still, listen, and learn, they can because
mhm.
their brains are satisfied. So,
I think that's the big gap in people's understanding, that if you don't understand development and how development is interrelated and interdependent
right.
on everything, you can't just work on the cognitive system, right? You can't do that, because that's going to impact all these other domains of development. Or if you just work on physical, and the one thing that worries me about that sports aspect of physical, because parents are even seeing, I got to get my kid to be more physical, so I'm going to put them in soccer, or I'm going to put them in, heaven forbid, football, or I'm going to put them in gymnastics, where it's repetitive
Yeah. A
practice.
lot of sitting around waiting for directions.
Waiting, yes. And again, it's teacher led. There's no freedom of
Right.
movement, no freedom. You have to do it this way, and you have to do it over and over and over again. And so, I look at Tiger Woods, for example, who started holding a golf club when he was, I don't know, 3, I think is what his father says. And how that repetitive over and over practice with those movements interfered with his physical development, and his back is weaker,
Yep.
he
Yep.
won't
Exactly. He had that
strain.
surgery.
Yes, and so the same thing happens to children who are in soccer, who are
Yeah.
hitting the ball with one foot in most cases in repetitive practice. And so, and I know that parents are just trying to do what's best for their children.
Of course.
Again, not understanding development. They think, well, I need to put them in these things because they're not getting it at school or at home.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why we really need to fill that gap at school very
Mhm.
purposefully and intentionally, because it's not going to get filled. Hopefully it will eventually get filled after school and we'll go back to that outdoor
Playing for all the
play.
time,
And
all
but
day, every
yeah,
day.
but we need to kind of move. I feel like if we can get schools on board, then it will organically push out to parents and help them understand how important that physical play really is for their kids. Because, when we don't build this body brain connection through the physicality of play, then it's almost like sending a child to school and giving them half of what they need to learn, half of a pencil, half a book, half of a desk, half of an equation, and expecting them to, be successful. And it's just impossible. It's just not fair. It's making
Mhm.
school hard when it doesn't need to be. And again, it's inexpensive, readily available, something kids crave, apolitical.
Yes. And so the other big piece is I remember on the playground, and I was not a physical kid. So I had a childhood injury, lots of surgeries. I had
Oh,
restrictive movement, right? For 11 years. PE, I hated PE. I hated it. I hated it. I hated
yeah, it
it.
was all
And
sports back then.
yes. Oh yeah. And I remember I threw a huge party the last semester I had to take PE in high school. I was so excited that I didn't have to do PE anymore. But I remember on the playground, even with my physical limitations on the playground, we played Red Rover. We played
Right.
um what is tetherball? Oh my God, I love tetherball.
Tetherball was awesome.
I love tetherball.
And how many times did you get hit in the head with the ball?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And my mom, I would come home, big red bark. She'd
Yeah.
say, tetherball. And I'd go, yep.
Yep. And it was awesome.
But I mean, Red Rover, tetherball. The only thing I could really track with a racket was a birdie from what's this one called with a birdie?
Volleyball. I mean, sorry. Oh my gosh, why are we blanking on that?
Because I don't know why, because we're old, Preston. Whatever it was with the birdie, it went slow enough
Yep.
that I could actually hit it with a racket, which was really exciting since most of the time everything just sort of went through the racket and I never hit the
Yeah.
ball. So it's those kinds of things, even when you don't have a great understanding of where your body is in space. But I still played. I
Right.
rode down the middle of the street with no hands on the handlebars of my bicycle.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you climb trees. All of those fun jump rope. Oh my goodness, I love jump rope.
That was awesome.
But my college students have never played hopscotch,
What?
have never played jacks.
What?
No, they're like, what is that, Dr. Lawrence? I said, this is jacks, and I'm going to teach you how to play. And they're like, this is fun. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
a jump rope that is Chinese jump rope, or either
Oh my gosh. So much fun.
never seen it. I pull it out of the crate when we're outside playing, and they're like, what's that? And I'm
Oh,
like, okay, come over. And so I'm teaching them these childhood games that they have never ever played.
oh wow.
Dodgeball, they played that. I'm trying to think of what else but they said, but then somebody got hurt, so they wouldn't let us play it anymore. And I'm
Yeah,
just
I've
like,
heard that too. And that's
Red Rover. They've never played Red Rover.
can't play it anymore. A lot
No.
of schools will not let you play it.
And isn't that the saddest thing?
I know. I mean, did everybody not get clotheslined in Red Rover? And we're all fine.
We're fine. I loved Red Rover.
I did too. I played it. I was really into it this summer that I had a broken collarbone, which made it
Oh,
very tricky to play Red
okay.
Rover. But I was all in. I was
You are all in.
all in.
I'm going to do it. And I mean, it really teaches you strength and resilience
Yeah.
and working with people on both sides of you.
Yeah, and typically, it was fun because it was multi-age. That's the other
Yeah.
thing. We don't have a lot of physical play that's multi-age. And there's so much that we can take from that and learn from that, and they learn from each other, that we've kind of removed. Lots of times recess time even is divided into age group or class, and I think that's terrible. We should be, third through fifth grade should be out on the playground together, and the fifth grade can learn leadership skills, and the little kids can learn what there is expected of them as they become fourth and fifth graders. And there's a lot of social emotional stuff that can go on when you have multiple ages out playing at the same time.
And a lot of, for those fifth graders, it's really interesting when I walk into infant rooms, when I'm doing observations of students. When I walk into infant rooms, they have the tiny, tiny infants, all protected. They're in some god awful prison device, is what I call them, because they don't want the other kids to hurt them. I
Mhm.
said, have you ever tried to put an infant on the floor on their back and watch the other infants? And they said, no. I said, let's try it. We can
Awesome.
sit
What
right
happened?
here. We'll sit right here with them. And so sure enough, we put the baby on the floor on their back. The baby's kicking, the baby's, um, looking this way and looking this way. And the other infants are moving right around that baby. There's
Yeah.
nobody is hurting that baby. And they go, oh. And I
Yeah.
said, yeah, stop putting them in the swing. Put them on
Yeah.
the floor on their back.
And when they're on the floor, they're going to build core strength. They're going to build, upper body and lower body strength. They're going to,
Yes.
all kinds of juicy stuff is happening.
It's so amazing. But instead, they just move them from the swing to the high chair to the exerciser to the crib.
Yeah.
Swing, high chair, exerciser, crib. And I'm
So,
like, no, that's
so
not
they're
what
not
babies do.
building core strength. They're not building a lot of the vestibular stuff that they need to help their brains understand movement and balance. So they're setting them up for failure when they get to preschool, because their bodies are going to move even when we don't want them to move, because their brains have not received that information yet.
And I think that's the key. If you don't understand development, then the long-term consequences of not understanding how a human develops
Yeah.
is going to have a long term impact on their readiness, as we always
Yeah.
say. So it's all of those sorts of things that I guess we haven't done a really good job of explicitly explaining it, that
Right.
if you do this, then this doesn't happen, and here's a long-term consequence. And that's almost what I think we
That's what
have to
I do. Is
black and white. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. That's exactly what you're doing.
Because it's based on brain science. It's 1,000% developmentally appropriate, and it's really kind of logical when you think about it. It's like, oh yeah, and so much of that moving that we all had as kids really came to a hard stop right around 2000. In school and out of school, it just kind of went sedentary behaviors. That's all we're doing, whether it's technology after school or sitting to tests, preparing for tests in school. And that's just, we've done them such a disservice by going down this rabbit hole.
And for 24 years, it hasn't worked.
Right, right. It's just
And
get
yet
making,
we still do it.
yeah,
And that's what I talk to superintendents about. I said, has it worked? Has
yeah,
an hour and a half of reading and an hour and a half of math improved your math scores?
right.
And they go, no.
Yeah,
Then why are we doing it? It has having children take 5 different screening tools or assessment tools to measure one domain
right.
helped you. I said, what do you do with all that data? Oh, there's too much data. We can't do anything with it. Then why do it?
What do you have it?
Why are you doing it? And they're doing it because they feel like they have to show results, but then they don't analyze the data. I have this wonderful thing that I used to be able to teach before COVID, where I would get a bunch of superintendents and principals in a room, and it was that here's what early childhood is, right? So it's all about, and so we went through everything, right? So we get to the assessment part, and they've been really active. They've been moving around the room. They've been working with each other. They've been having discussions. They've been debating different issues. They've been doing lots of active learning. And so I say, okay, now I need you to write down every assessment that you're currently using and what it's used to assess. And so, oh, they're just so busy. They're just like together and they're writing down, oh yeah, we use this one and this one, this one, this one, this one. And I said, okay, so let's just take this table. And so they had it on big chart paper. I put it up and I said, okay, how many of you use this one? And almost everybody raised their hand. And I said, so what does it assess? And they said, oh, it assesses fluency. And I said, okay, for reading. Okay, great. How many children's fluency has increased since you started doing this test? And they all look at me and they said, well, I'm not really sure. And I said, okay, so you're giving, and how many fluency tests are on this list? There were 3. How many of you use all 3 of these to test fluency? Everybody raised their hand. I said, okay. So you're telling me that you have 3 tests that you use on a regular basis, like once a week or once every 3 weeks. What do you do with the data? And they're like, well, we look at the data. I said, yeah, but what do you do with the data once you've seen the data? And they're just like this. I said, okay, let's just cross off these 3. You don't need these anymore. And we move on to the math ones. It was hysterical. I was like, and they said, we're just overwhelmed with data. I said, then you're not doing anybody any good. And you're certainly not doing active learning in the classroom.
Right.
And so it's those kinds of things that they're doing it because they are so stressed out about getting these stupid test scores up. And it's just,
Right.
and having trouble figuring that out because they're so overwhelmed.
And I feel like administrators keep adding more to that equation. Well, you need to do this, you need to do this, and they're not taking anything away.
Mhm.
So, I've done some trainings before where I've told the administrators, you have to take something away, take something off their plate. If you want to help them learn how to get kids moving during the school day, you have to take something off their plate so that they can. And they're all like, oh, never.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah. Well, and these principals and superintendents, I said, how many of these can you get rid of? How many do you actually need?
Yeah.
And so they got rid of, I don't know, probably 10 assessments that they do a year off the teacher's plate.
Good.
And it was an illuminating, I'll say, experience for them. And so I said, so what else could you get rid of? And so then they had a wonderful conversation about, well, could we get rid of this and do more of this? And could we get rid of
Yeah,
this
that's
and do
awesome.
more of this? Yeah. But,
Yeah.
and so they left after a week of, unfortunately, having to listen to me but they were actively learning.
Good.
They left and I said, now, how much of this will you actually remember? And they said, well, we're going to remember the stories and we're going to remember what you had us do. And I said, so how could children remember?
Great. The same
In
way.
active learning, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, I think it's almost like that. We need 4 days
Yeah.
of explicit active instruction in
Right.
order to help them make those connections that they're too busy and too overwhelmed to see. And so
Right.
that's what I hope for the future. I hope we
Oh,
can,
I'm with you. Then I'd be out of a job, which is great. That's the goal.
yeah, and me too. Wouldn't that be
Hey, what?
fabulous?
We
We
can go on
didn't
a
have
big
to,
vacation together to a fancy island.
but we could be out of a job and I would welcome
Yeah.
that because
Yeah.
it's exhausting,
Right.
trying to change the perception of people who played when they were children, but have not carried over. It's that Bebba's childhood amnesia thing that we are up against all the time.
Yep.
Preston, this has been wonderful. Do you have any closing thoughts before we stop?
Oh, closing thoughts. If you missed the International Day of Play yesterday and didn't get a chance to play, please find some time today or tomorrow or the next day to play and get little people and medium-sized people around you to play too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So much fun. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
And you know it is. You just don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
That memory is what is gone.
It's like riding a
So
bike.
it is.
As soon as you
Exactly.
start, it's like, oh, feels good. This is so fun.
It feels so wonderful. So hang in, Preston, while I close this out. To
Okay.
learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.